The sky broke open with dust and judgment before noon. Eli Jameson had not meant to be in Dry Creek that day. His wagon wheel had split a mile out, a mean trick of fate that drove him slow and bitter into town on foot, reins in one hand, silence in the other. He didn't owe anyone in Dry Creek anything, not their stares, not their words, not their pity. Since the drought took his herd and a fever took his wife, Eli lived with only the creak of fence posts and the whistle of wind for company, and for years he had thought that was enough. But fate did not ask. Fate threw him headlong into the square, where the auctioneer's voice rose above the buzz of flies and muttered judgment. A platform had been raised, nothing more than 2 barrels and a board, but it carried the weight of shame. Standing there was a young woman heavy with child, her shoulders straight though her dress sagged from use. Beside her, a little girl clutched her hand, small as a fawn, eyes too old for her face. The auctioneer's words rolled smooth, like oil over stone. Settler widow, healthy, quiet, comes with the child, no debts. The crowd shifted, restless but unwilling. Men shook their heads, women muttered under breath. A widow, swollen with another man's baby. A girl already walking. Trouble, burden, whispers waiting to be spread from porch to porch. No man in town was fool enough to step forward. Not for that. The woman kept her chin lifted, though her hand pressed tight to the swell of her belly, as if holding herself in place. The child's fingers twitched against her palm. A coin flicked into the dust, not as bid, but mockery. Laughter, sharp and cruel, stung the air. Eli did not think. His boots carried him forward before his mind caught up. Dust rose around him, and the murmurs of the crowd tightened into a silence meant to cut. He stopped at the platform, removed his hat, and spoke with a voice that was steady from years of solitude. "I'll take them." The auctioneer blinked, startled. "You sure, Jameson? You know what you're buying?" Eli nodded once. No speeches, no defense. He reached into his coat, pulled a folded packet of bills, and pressed it into the man's palm. The sound of paper against skin was louder than any cheer. The widow's eyes darted up, gray and storm-heavy, meeting his for the first time. Not gratitude, not hope. Only a startled caution, the look of someone who had long stopped expecting. "A way out. What's your name?" the auctioneer asked her. She hesitated, lips parted but unwilling. Finally, she answered low. "Does it matter?" The auctioneer shrugged, pocketed the money, and stepped aside. "Guess not." The girl stared at Eli, unblinking. She studied him like a wild creature, weighing threat against safety in a single glance. He turned, his voice even. "Come on." They stepped down together. 3 shadows pressed against the dust of Dry Creek. Parasols snapped shut. Store clerks turned signs to closed. Even the sheriff, leaning at his doorway, called out, "You've got a reputation for loneliness, Jameson. Don't add foolish to it." Eli did not answer. Foolishness had never frightened him. At the edge of town, his horse waited. He lifted the girl onto the saddle without asking. She didn't flinch, just gripped the pommel and looked back at the square with eyes too sharp for 7 years. The woman climbed up slow behind her, one hand on the horn, the other steady on her belly. Eli walked beside, reins in hand, his boots, raising dust as storm clouds rolled over the prairie like judgment waiting its turn. The ride was silent, save for the creak of leather and the whisper of crows overhead. Time stretched long, the prairie holding its breath. By the time they reached his ranch, a plain house with a slanted roof and a barn that sagged from years of neglect, the sun had dipped, painting the horizon in bruised colors. The woman dismounted carefully, her hand lingering on her daughter's shoulder. She stood before the house a long while as though it were a test she had not studied for. No words, no tears, only the slight easing of her hand away from her belly, as if some weight shifted for the first time. Eli set his hat back on his head, voice low. "I'll take the barn. You take the house." She shook her head, firm though. Quiet. We'll take the floor. You'll take the bed, Eli replied, and turned away before she could argue. The girl's voice followed him, soft as a tether. Are there horses? One, he answered, pausing. A good one. Does he like children? Eli's mouth twitched at the corner. He's still deciding. That night, rain came at last. It rattled the tin roof in silver ribbons, washing the land clean. In the house, the widow curled on one side of the bed, the girl tucked close. In the barn, Eli lay in the hay, staring at rafters and listening to the storm sing against the roof. No names had been exchanged, no promises made, but in the quiet between lightning strikes, Eli felt something stir that had long been dead inside. Him, not hope, not yet, but the faintest coal beneath ash, waiting for breath. Morning came with silence too heavy to trust. Eli woke to wet hay and the ache that comes from boards pretending to be a bed. The rain had rinsed the night clean. He rose, brushed straw from his shirt, crossed the yard, and knocked before stepping inside the cabin. The woman had the stove going. Steam lifted from a small pot. The girl sat at the table, tracing little roads in soot with her finger. Both looked up. Neither spoke. You keep the house, Eli said, in case the night had changed the rule. I'll be in the barn. She nodded. Her eyes were clearer now, less storm and more sky. There's coffee, she said. He took the tin cup she offered. Their fingers didn't touch, but the space between them warmed. He drank, set the cup down, and kept his voice even. Chores, fences first, then the east hinge. The girl glanced at her mother. May, the woman murmured, and the name slipped out like breath. Eli didn't smile, but something eased in his shoulders. You can look at the horse after breakfast, he told the child. If your ma says so. A small nod. Permission granted. He worked the morning into shape. Wire. Stretched, posts sunk, the barn breathing like an animal. When he looked back, the window stood propped open with a spoon, the curtain pinned. The woman moved through the rooms like a careful wind, sweeping, airing, and setting things to rights. She found flour and made cornbread. She stitched a cracked bowl to hold apples again. Nothing wasted, little spoken. By noon, the sun bit through cloud. May appeared at the barn door with a seriousness that would have suited a judge. Eli handed her a brush. Slow, he said. Let a horse know your hands intend kindness. She copied his motion, small strokes along the mare's neck. The horse lowered its head, breath huffing against her wrist. Does she have a name? May asked. She did once, he said. I stopped using it when the pasture went empty. Maybe she's waiting to hear it again. He didn't answer. Some things felt safer, left unsaid until they were true. Mid-afternoon, the hinge that had squealed for months finally swung quiet as a prayer. The woman stepped onto the porch, one hand on her back. You mend things, she said. Some I can, he replied. Some people leave things broken. She didn't add more. Apples scented the air when she closed the door. At the creek, he filled a pail and noticed marks in the lane. Wagon ruts old enough to ignore, boot prints new enough to matter. He pressed 2 fingers into the damp edge. Too light for the sheriff. Not his. The grass swallowed the trail before it told him anything useful. Inside, May read from a ragged primer. Her voice wobbled on long words and steadied on small ones. The woman kneaded dough with the focus of someone who had counted coins too many times to waste flour. Eli washed at the basin and said nothing about the prints. Nails rattled into a plate by the door. Habit turned ritual. He ate stew that tasted of onion and patience. After supper, he bound a broken rake while the woman mended a shirt with thread pulled from her hem. The rasp of twine and the scrape of needle filled the space where talk might have gone. First star pricked through. May brought him a crooked wooden rabbit she'd carved with his old penknife. "It's not perfect," she said. "Neither is the real thing," he answered, and set it on the railing for the moon to forgive its ears. Down the road a wagon clattered, then quieted. The sound lingered longer than it should. Eli felt the silence tilt, the way a man feels weather change through a scar. He stood. "I'll check the fence line before dark." The woman's eyes followed, worried but proud. "We'll keep the lamp lit," she said. He walked the ridge. Grass lay combed by wind. He found nothing but the memory of tracks and a cigarette. Butt near the cottonwoods, stamped out with care. He pocketed it. Small thing, larger meaning. When he returned, the windows glowed warm. May slept curled like a comma by the hearth. The woman stood with one hand on the table as if steadying the house itself. "Anything?" she asked. "Not tonight." They let that answer become a truce. He fetched his blanket. She slid another nail into the door. Coyotes tuned the dark, like fiddles. Eli lay in the barn, hat brim low, the day's work and questions stacked on his chest. Beyond the creek, an owl called once and kept its secrets. The wind held its breath. The prairie listened back tonight. The wind shifted before dawn, carrying whispers that didn't belong. Eli rose with the gray light, boots heavy from another night in the barn. He found May already awake, crouched near the henhouse, whispering to a chicken that looked half dead, but determined to keep pecking at life. She glanced up, serious as ever. "She was hiding," May said. "I think she's lonely." Eli knelt, studied the bird, ragged feathers, eyes sharp. "Then she'll fit right in." May smiled, the kind of smile a child gives only when they believe it's safe. It was the first he had seen from her. Inside, Florence, he still didn't know her name, not yet, was stirring a pot of oats. She moved slow, her belly stretching her dress, her breath catching now and again. Still, her hands were steady. She slid a bowl toward him when he came in, never asking if he wanted it. He ate without complaint. The day passed into rhythm. Tasks, posts, dust, repairs. She washed clothes at the creek, sleeves rolled, her figure outlined against the water and the cottonwoods. Eli noticed how the townsfolk's words had left lines in her face deeper than the years should have carved. He didn't speak it. He only carried the bucket back when she staggered, setting it down like it weighed nothing. By afternoon, a buggy rattled down the lane. Mrs. Talbot, basket on her lap, bonnet tied too tight, judgment strapped across her, face like armor. She didn't dismount, just called from the yard. "Mr. Jameson, a word, if you please." Eli stepped onto the porch, arms folded. She looked past him, toward the window where the child's eyes glinted. "I do hope you're being careful. Charity is noble, but folks are whispering. A man in your position—" "It's a roof and a meal," Eli cut in. "That's all." Mrs. Talbot pursed her lips until they nearly vanished. "People are saying otherwise. She's not your kin, not your wife, and that girl—" Eli's jaw tightened. "That's enough." Mrs. Talbot sniffed, set the basket down harder than needed, and snapped the reins. The buggy rolled away in a spray of dust. Through the window, he saw Florence watching. She didn't thank him. She only mended his shirt that evening, laying it folded by the door like a quiet reply. Night fell with the weight of a storm. The wind pushed at the shutters. May chased her half-dead chicken in the yard until laughter broke free of her throat like lightning across a dry sky. Eli froze at the sound, surprised by its brightness. Florence stepped onto the porch, arms crossed, a softness in her eyes. "She hasn't laughed in months," she whispered. "It's a good sound," he said. "You always this quiet?" "Mostly." "Good." She tilted her head, studying him, like she might a stranger on the trail. For the first time, there was no fear in her gaze. Only something else, cautious, but warming. Later, after the lamps burned low, Eli checked the fence line. He found the latch on the far stall broken clean. Too clean. Not whether, not where. He bent and touched the dirt. A cigarette butt lay, smoldering still, left behind like a warning. When he returned, rifle in hand, he sat on the porch until dawn, eyes sharp on the horizon. The prairie didn't sleep that night. Neither did Eli. The prairie wore its silence like a warning. By the week's end, gossip in Dry Creek had turned sharp. At the general store, Eli heard it carried between sacks of flour. "That girl's bad luck," one voice muttered. "First her husband. Now fires close to town. Trouble follows where she goes." Eli said nothing. Words couldn't be punched, and gossip burned out faster when left unfed. Still, he noticed how Florence wrapped her shawl tighter when they went into town, how her eyes never settled on any face for long. Sunday came with a hard sun and a brittle sky. Eli hitched the wagon without asking, and Florence appeared in the doorway with May beside her. A ribbon tied crooked in the girl's hair, a shawl draped across her mother's shoulders. She didn't ask where they were going. She only climbed into the wagon. The ride into town was quiet. May sat between them, hands folded in her lap, watching fence posts flick past like soldiers lined for inspection. The church steeple cut against the sky, stern and white. Already townsfolk gathered, boots stomping dust, bonnets fluttering in the wind. Heads turned as soon as Eli pulled up, eyes narrowed, lips whispered. Florence stepped down first, unhurried, May's hand clasped in hers like a tether. They climbed. The steps together, their shoulders square, their pace steady. Eli walked behind, hat brim low. No one moved to let them pass, but no one barred the way either. Inside, hymns lined the air like soldiers on parade. They sat near the back. Around them, a small space opened, unspoken, uneasy, as if sorrow could rub off on sleeves. The preacher's voice carried heavy, every sermon word bent toward consequence, storms, and cleansing. He never named her, but his gaze skimmed like a blade. Afterward, the congregation spilled into the square. Voices sharpened. "Bold, showing up here." That poor child dragged into shame. "Jameson's always been strange. Now we know." Eli didn't flinch. He walked beside them back to the wagon. But near the store, Mrs. Talbot blocked the way, her lips tight as stitching thread. "Mr. Jameson, a word, if you'll allow." "Say it plain," Eli said. "You're respected in this town. No one faults you for kindness, but bringing her under your roof, it looks like something else. She's not your kin. She's not your wife. She's under my roof." Eli answered. "That's enough." Florence's hand trembled in May's, but she held her chin high. Mrs. Talbot flushed. "You'll ruin your name." Eli crouched to May's height, ignoring the stares. "You hungry?" he asked. The girl nodded. "Then let's go home." They climbed into the wagon. The tension followed them down the road like smoke that refused to clear. Florence touched Eli's arm lightly. "You didn't have to defend me." "Yes, I did." That night the house was not heavy with silence. It was softer, wrapped in wood smoke and the faint laughter of a child chasing fireflies in the yard. Florence lingered on the porch, her voice low. "I haven't been in church since Tom died. Figured God had already made up his mind about me." "Maybe God's quieter than people," Eli said. "Maybe he listens more." For the first time she smiled, not wide, not long, but real. The next day, Eli rode to town for supplies. The clerk hesitated before bagging flour. The blacksmith nodded but said nothing. The boys on the saloon porch stared until he passed. Eli let it wash over him like dust in the wind. He bought boots small enough for May, a comb Florence would never ask for, and a bar of lavender soap. He bought nails, too. Fixing things had become a habit again. When he returned, Florence met him in the yard, arms dusted with flour. She took the bags without question but lingered, her gaze thoughtful. "I used to think surviving was enough," she said quietly. "But lately I've been wondering if there's more." "There is," Eli said. She studied him. "How do you know?" "Because the house doesn't feel empty anymore." Her eyes glistened, though she turned away before tears could betray her. That evening May read aloud, her voice thin but rising. Florence mended shirts at the table, her needle pulling rhythm into the silence. Outside, the prairie exhaled slow, as if waiting. And then came the knock at the door. Eli opened it to find Preacher Wallace, hat in hand, words sharp behind a softened smile. "Some folks are troubled by appearances," he said. "Perhaps the widow might find peace through repentance, public confession. It would calm the town." "She's not a criminal," Eli said flat. "She's a mother. She's endured more than most ever will." The preacher shifted, cleared his throat, and left with a nod. When Eli turned back, Florence stood there, her face unreadable. "Do you believe him?" she asked. "No. But you believe me?" Eli met her eyes. "I believe what I see," she swallowed. "And what do you see?" A woman still standing. For the first time her mouth parted, as though the weight in her chest had given way. That night, May left a wood carving on the porch rail. A horse, rough but proud, with two small figures beside it. Beneath, she'd scratched one word in crooked letters: safe. Eli picked it up, turned it in his palm, and felt something inside him steady. The first sign of trouble came on hooves too fresh to ignore. Eli spotted the tracks mid-morning, deep prints pressed into damp earth near the creek bed. Not his mare, not the sheriff's gelding, a stranger's horse, heavy with weight. He knelt, fingers pressed against the ridge of the print, jaw tightening. Whoever rode through hadn't come to trade or pass. They had lingered, watching. When he returned, Florence was hanging laundry slow, her belly stretched tight beneath her dress. She moved as though each breath cost her. Eli held the sight of her in silence before saying, "Someone's been close." Her hands stilled on the line. She didn't ask who. She only nodded once, eyes darkening with something he couldn't yet name. That night May woke crying, her voice sharp with fear. "A man," she whispered, pointing toward the barn. "I saw him." Eli grabbed his rifle, swept the stalls, found nothing but a broken latch and a cigarette still smoldering in dirt. He stayed on the porch until dawn, rifle across his lap, while the wind carried the echo of May's fear across the prairie. By morning the sheriff rode up, dust streaking his boots. "There's talk of a drifter," he said, asking after a young widow, not the kind of man who takes no kindly. Florence stood in the doorway, arms wrapped around her belly. "I know who it is," she said. Eli turned, steady. "Then tell me. My husband's brother, Jacob. He said if Tom ever died, I was his to claim. Said it like a joke, but it wasn't." Her voice broke flat. "He'll come." Eli's jaw set like stone. "Then we'll be ready." The days that followed hung heavy, each one stretched by waiting. May shadowed Eli, asking endless questions to keep the silence from swallowing them whole. She carved little animals from scraps of wood. One a rabbit with lopsided ears, another a horse with legs too short. She left them on the porch rail as if they were talismans to guard the house. Florence planted herbs in the back, whispering names under her breath as she bent over soil. Her steps grew slower, heavier with the child close to term, but she refused rest. At night, Eli heard her move through the house like someone afraid of standing still too long. One evening they shelled beans together on the porch. She spoke without looking at him. "Why haven't you sent us away?" "Why would I?" he asked. "Because I see the way they look at me, like I'm something fouled. You could have ended it that first day." "You're not here for them," Eli said. "You're here for you." Her lips parted, then closed again. She whispered after a long while, "I thought I'd stopped believing in decency. But you keep handing it to me like it's nothing." "It's not nothing," Eli said. "It's just quiet." That night, thunder rolled on the horizon. The air pressed close, thick with heat. Near midnight, May's cry cut sharp through the stillness. Eli was up with his rifle before the sound had faded. This time, he found more than shadows. The latch was broken again, cleaner than before, the boards forced wide. A cigarette stub glowed faint in the dirt. Tracks led off toward the ridge, swallowed by cottonwoods. Eli returned to the porch, jaw set. Florence stood in the doorway, face pale, but unflinching. "It's him," she said. Eli didn't answer. He didn't need to. He only lowered himself into the chair, rifle across his lap, and stared into the dark until dawn. The prairie didn't breathe that night. Neither did he. The rider showed himself when the sun burned highest. Eli had been expecting it. The tracks told the story days before. But seeing the silhouette against the ridge was different. Real, sharp, final. A black horse lathered in sweat. A man riding slow like he already owned the land. Florence stood on the porch, one hand braced against her belly. "It's him," she whispered. "Jacob." Her voice went flat, the same emptiness Eli had heard when she first stepped down from that auction platform. Jacob didn't hurry. Men like him never did. He wanted to be seen, to show there was no rush, no fear. His horse carried him down the trail like a verdict. He didn't dismount at the fence, just leaned forward, a smile slick with certainty. "Well now, Jacob," drawled, "you must be the one." Eli stepped off the porch, hat brim low, hands empty but steady. He didn't carry his rifle. He didn't need to show it. He carried himself like a man who was a wall. "You have no claim here," Eli said. Jacob laughed, short and sharp. "Don't I? She's my brother's, always was. We had an understanding. She goes where I say. The girl too. Kin is kin." "She's not property," Eli answered, voice flat. Jacob's grin twitched. "Heard you bought her like stock. That true? Paid good coin?" Eli didn't blink. "I gave her a roof." Jacob's eyes narrowed. "Roof don't make you family. Behind him," the screen door creaked. Florence stepped out, barefoot, pale but standing straight. "You don't get to show up and make rules, Jacob. You never did." He looked at her, sneer curling. "Still carrying Tom's brat? Or maybe his? You think this man's gonna stay once your belly splits?" "I'm carrying my child," Florence said, chin high. Jacob swung down in one motion, tall and whip-lean, boots crunching the dirt. His hands twitched like they were hunting for something to break. "I could take her right now," he said softly, almost kindly. "Take the girl, too. Think this town would stop me? Think they care? I care." Eli said, "That's enough." Jacob struck first. A fast jab, meant to rattle. It clipped Eli's jaw, sent the taste of blood to his tongue. He didn't stagger. He stood steady, like wind against rock. "That all you got?" Eli asked. His voice was calm enough to chill. Jacob frowned, swung again. This time Eli moved. His punch landed square to the chest, clean and deliberate. Jacob stumbled back, breath gone. Eli didn't follow it. He didn't have to. His stillness was louder than fists. "You talk like a preacher," Jacob spat, straightening. "Fight like one, too." Florence's voice cut across the yard, sharper than the wind. "Leave, Jacob. There's nothing for you here." He sneered at her. "You think this man will love you? You're ruined. That kid's a burden." Florence stared at him, unflinching. "She's not a burden. She's my beginning." For the first time, Jacob's smile faltered. He looked at her, then at Eli, and something in him cracked. He spat in the dirt, mounted, and turned his horse toward the ridge. "This town's soft," he growled. "You'll regret it." Eli didn't answer. He only watched until Jacob was a shadow swallowed by horizon. The prairie went still after. No wind, no bird call. Even the grass seemed to hold its breath. Florence sagged against the porch rail, hand pressed to her side. Eli stepped closer, steady as ever. "He won't come back soon," he said. Her eyes met his, raw and wet. "You don't know him?" "No," Eli said, "but I know you, and I know me." For a long moment, nothing moved. Then May's small voice broke the silence, fragile but fierce. "He's gone, Mama. He's gone." Eli looked at her, then back at Florence. The fight wasn't over, not yet. But something had shifted, and it was enough. The town's silence cut sharper than words. 2 days passed before Eli hitched the wagon again. Supplies were low, nails nearly gone, and May's boots wore thin at the toes, despite being new. Florence tried to protest, but Eli's quiet answer ended it. "I'll be back before sundown." Dry Creek looked smaller when he rode in, though the stairs felt bigger. The store clerk bagged flour slow, eyes flicking between Eli's face and the whispers crawling through the room. "The E.E.?" Blacksmith gave a nod, but no words. On the saloon porch, men leaned into one another, muttering low, boots tapping as Eli passed. He let it all wash over him like dust. He bought flour, nails, a book for May, and a comb Florence would never ask for. On the way out, he paused at the lavender soap, thumb running over the paper wrap, then dropped it into the sack. When he returned, Florence met him in the yard, apron dusted with flour. She took the bags without asking what he'd brought, but her gaze lingered on him longer than before. "I used to think surviving was enough," she said quietly. "Just getting through the day. But now I wonder if there's more." "There is," Eli said. Her eyes held his, searching. "How do you know?" "Because the house doesn't sound empty anymore." Her lips parted as if to answer, but she turned away before the tears could betray her. That evening, May read aloud from the new book, her voice steadying with each page. Florence mended Eli's shirt at the table, needle flashing in lamplight. The rhythm of reading and stitching filled the cabin like a hymn. Eli sat back, boots resting heavy on the floor, letting the sound settle into the wood. A knock came sudden at the door. Eli opened it to Preacher Wallace, hat in hand, smile sharp as glass. "Evening," the preacher said. "Some folks are troubled. Appearances, you understand. A widow, a child, a man alone. It invites talk. Perhaps she might confess, repent, ease the town's worry." Eli's jaw clenched. "She has nothing to confess. She's not a criminal. She's a mother." The preacher shifted. "It would calm them." "She's not here for them." Eli cut him off. His voice was final, steel wrapped in calm. The preacher faltered, then tipped his hat, retreating into the dark. When Eli closed the door, Florence was standing there. "I heard," she whispered. "I figured," he said. "Do you believe him?" "No." "But, you believe me?" Eli met her eyes, steady. "I believe what I see." Her breath caught. "And what do you see?" A woman still standing. For the first time, her mouth softened. A door opened behind her eyes. That night, May carved another figure and left it on the hearth. This one was a horse with 2 people beside it. Crooked letters beneath spelled a single word: home. Eli folded it into his palm, tucked it into his coat pocket, and felt something settle in his chest. Later, as dusk bent the sky into bruised colors, Florence lingered at the porch rail. Eli stepped out, leaning against the post. For a long time, neither spoke. Then, softly, she asked, "Do you want to know my name?" Eli nodded once. "Florence." He repeated it, slow, letting the syllables sit in the air. "Florence." Her face shifted at the sound, like a burden slipped a little from her shoulders. "You..." "Remind me," she whispered, "of the man I hoped my husband would become." Eli didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was waiting. The prairie wind moved gentle that night, and for the first time, the cabin hummed, not with sorrow, but with the promise of staying. The wind carried dust like it meant to test them one last time. By morning, the land wore a restless hush. Eli noticed the tracks first. Hoof prints cutting too deep into the ridge trail, leading down toward the cottonwoods. He didn't have to ask. He knew who they belonged to. Florence stood on the porch, rubbing her lower back, eyes fixed on the horizon. "It's Jacob," she said flatly. He used to brag that everything Tom owned would fall to him. "Even me." Eli's voice stayed calm. "He won't take anything." She looked at him, weary but steady. "You don't know him." "No," Eli said, "but I know you. And I know me." By afternoon, the rider appeared. Jacob came slow, a shadow against the sun, his grin sharp as a blade. He didn't dismount at first, just sat on his horse and let the silence stretch. Finally, he called out, "Heard you bought her. That true?" Eli stepped down from the porch. "She's not for sale." Jacob laughed, slid from his saddle, and moved closer. "She's my brother's. Always was. Blood makes the claim. Law don't care what you think." Florence's voice cut across the yard. "You never owned me, Jacob. Not then. Not now." Jacob's face twisted. "You carrying his brat still? Or maybe his?" He jerked a thumb at Eli. "I'm carrying my child," Florence answered, chin unbroken. Jacob sneered, stepped forward, and swung hard. His fist clipped Eli's jaw. Eli staggered, then straightened like stone. "That all you've got?" he asked. Eli struck back once, a clean blow to the chest that sent Jacob stumbling. He didn't follow it up. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than rage. Florence moved closer, bare feet in the dust. "Leave, Jacob. There's nothing for you here." "You think this man will love you?" Jacob spat. "You're ruined. That kid's a burden." Florence held his stare. "She's not a burden. She's my beginning." The words landed heavier than fists. Jacob's sneer slipped. He spat in the dirt, mounted, and rode off without looking back. The wind died with him. That night, May climbed into Eli's lap, a blanket around her shoulders. "Were you scared?" she asked. Eli smiled. "Faint. Maybe a little." Florence sat across the room, her hand folded over her belly, her face softer than he'd ever seen it. "I didn't think anyone would ever stand for me," she whispered. "I didn't stand for you," Eli said gently. "I stood with you." Their fire hummed, not with silence, but with something fuller, earned through fear, through defiance, through the thin thread of decency. No declarations, no kiss. But in the morning, when Eli set a second cup of coffee at the table and Florence took it without hesitation, it was enough. Later, May drew in the ashes of the hearth, a tall man with a crooked hat, a woman with sunlight in her hair, and a little girl between them. Beneath, in crooked letters, she wrote one word: home. The prairie might still talk. The town would still whisper. But within those walls, under that roof, the only voice that mattered was the one that had chosen to stay. And maybe that's all life in the frontier ever needed. Not perfection, not permission, but a hand offered, a place made, and someone who says, "I see you, and I won't look away." Stories like these remind us that sometimes the bravest thing a man or woman can do is simply stay. If this tale of hardship, redemption, and found family touched your heart, give it a like and share it with someone who still believes in decency on the frontier. Don't forget to subscribe to Shadow Frontier Tales for more journeys where love is tested, families are forged, and hope is never truly lost. Until next time, may your trail be steady, your fire burn warm, and your home be filled with those who choose to stand beside you.